You want to know what real betrayal feels like? Let me tell you. Let me paint you a picture so vivid, so raw, that you'll feel every ounce of the rage that burns through my veins every single day. My name is Imani Washington, and I was a fool, a complete and utter fool, who believed in love, in marriage vows, in the sanctity of family. But life has a way of ripping those illusions away from you, doesn't it? It tears them apart with such vicious precision that you're left standing there, bleeding, wondering how you could have been so blind. It started with money, $11 million, to be exact. My grandmother, God rest her soul, she was the only person who ever truly loved me in this world. The only one who saw me for who I was, not what I could give, not what I could be used for. When she passed, she left everything to me, everything, her estate, her investments, her legacy. $11 million. Can you imagine? I went from struggling to pay bills, from counting pennies at the grocery store, to inheriting a fortune that could change everything. But here's the thing about money, it doesn't just change your bank account, it changes people around you. It reveals who they really are, beneath those masks they wear so carefully. I remember the day I found out. I was sitting in that lawyer's office, my hands shaking as they read the will. $11 million. The number kept echoing in my head, like some kind of sick joke. My grandmother had built this wealth quietly, carefully, investing in properties and businesses that nobody in our family even knew about. She was brilliant like that, always 3 steps ahead. And she chose me. Out of everyone in our family, all those cousins and aunts and uncles who barely spoke to her when she was alive, she chose me to carry on her legacy. I should have known then. I should have seen the signs. The way Marcus's eyes lit up when I told him, the way his whole demeanor changed, like someone had flipped a switch inside him. He became attentive, loving, everything I had been begging him to be for years. He brought me flowers. He took me to dinner. He whispered sweet promises in my ear, about our future together, about all the things we could do with that money, and like the fool I was, I believed him. I thought my inheritance had reminded him of why he married me in the first place. I thought it had rekindled something that had been dying between us for years. How naive can one person be? How desperate. I was so starved for his affection that I couldn't see what was right in front of my face. Marcus didn't love me. He never loved me. And he loved what I could give him. And when I suddenly had 11 million reasons to be valuable, oh, he was all in. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the accident. Let me tell you about the moment everything shattered like glass under a hammer. It was a Tuesday evening. I remember because Tuesdays were always the worst days of my week. The day when the weight of my failing marriage felt heaviest. When Marcus would come home late, smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. When he'd look at me with such contempt that I felt like I was shrinking into nothing. I was driving home from the lawyer's office, actually. We'd been finalizing some paperwork for the inheritance, making sure everything was properly transferred, setting up accounts and trusts. My head was swimming with numbers and legal jargon, and I was distracted. So distracted. I didn't see the truck until it was too late. The driver ran a red light, at least. That's what the police report said later. But in that moment, all I saw was metal, and lights, and then nothing. Nothing but pain and darkness, and the sound of my own screaming echoing in my ears. My car flipped 3 times. 3 times. Each rotation felt like an eternity, my body thrown against the seatbelt, glass shattering around me, the world spinning in a kaleidoscope of terror and agony. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Every inch of my body screamed in pain. My left arm was in a cast, my ribs were broken, and my face, God, my face was so swollen I could barely see out of my right eye. The doctors told me later that I was lucky to be alive. Lucky. That's what they said. Lucky to have survived with just broken bones and internal bruising. Lucky that the truck hadn't hit me from a different angle. Lucky, lucky, lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt destroyed. The first thing I did when I could move my fingers was reach for my phone. I needed Marcus. I needed my husband to be there, to hold my hand, to tell me everything would be okay. Despite everything, despite all the pain he'd already caused me, I still reached for him in my darkest moment. Isn't that pathetic? The nurse helped me dial his number because my hands were shaking too badly to do it myself. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Please pick up, I prayed. Please be there for me this one time. He answered on the 4th ring. His voice was annoyed, impatient. What is it, Imani? I'm busy. No hello, no concern. just irritation that I had the audacity to call him. I tried to speak, but my voice came out as barely a whisper, my throat raw from the breathing tube they'd had down it. "Marcus," I croaked. "I've been in an accident. I'm in the hospital. I need you." Do you know what he said? Do you want to know what my loving husband, the man who had promised to be there in sickness and in health, said to me in that moment? He laughed. He actually laughed. A short, bitter sound that cut through me worse than any physical pain from the accident. "An accident? Of course you did. You're such a loser, Imani. Always causing problems. Always needing something. I don't have time for this. Figure it out yourself." And then he hung up. Just like that. Click. Dial tone. Silence. I stared at the phone in my trembling hand, unable to process what had just happened. The nurse who had been standing nearby looked at me with such pity that I wanted to scream. I didn't want her pity. I didn't want anyone's pity. I wanted my husband. I wanted the man I married to give a damn that I had almost died. But he didn't. He didn't care at all. I called him back. I don't know why. Pride? Desperation? Some sick need for him to prove that I had misheard, that he couldn't possibly be that cruel? The phone rang, and rang, and rang. He didn't answer. I called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. By the fifth try, I was sobbing so hard that the monitors attached to me started beeping, and nurses rushed in thinking I was having a medical emergency, but it wasn't my body that was failing, it was my heart. It was my soul. It was everything I thought I knew about my life crumbling into dust. They sedated me, gave me something to calm down, to stop the panic attack that was tearing through me. I drifted in and out of consciousness for hours, maybe days. Time became meaningless. Pain was my only constant companion. Pain and the replay of Marcus's words in my head. "Loser, you're such a loser." Over and over and over again, like a record stuck on the worst moment of a song. When I finally stabilized enough to stay conscious for more than a few minutes, the doctor came in to talk to me about my injuries. Broken arm, 3 cracked ribs, severe bruising throughout my torso, a concussion. I would recover, he said, but it would take time. Weeks, maybe months of physical therapy. I would need help at home. I would need someone to take care of me. I nodded along, not really hearing him, because all I could think about was how I was going to face this alone. My husband didn't want me. My family, well, my family was a whole other nightmare. I wasn't ready to confront yet. But then things got worse, so much worse, because 3 days after the accident, Marcus finally showed up at the hospital. I heard his voice in the hallway first, talking to someone, laughing. He was actually laughing. My heart leaped stupidly, hopefully. Maybe he had come to apologize. Maybe he had realized how terrible he'd been. Maybe there was still a chance for us. The door opened, and Marcus walked in, and my hope died instantly, because he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him, tall, beautiful, confident. She was wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than my car, or what was left of my car. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, her entire presence screaming success and power. And she was holding Marcus's hand. They were holding hands. In front of me. In my hospital room where I lay broken and battered. Marcus looked at me with such cold indifference that I felt like I'd been hit by that truck all over again. "Imani," he said, his voice flat. "We need to talk." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at them, at their intertwined fingers, at the way she stood so close to him, at the way he looked at her with something I hadn't seen in his eyes in years. Affection, desire, love. He loved her. Whoever she was, he loved her. And he had brought her here to parade her in front of me while I was at my most vulnerable. "This is Brenda," he continued, gesturing to the woman beside him. "My wife. His wife. His wife?" The words didn't make sense. I was his wife. Me, Imani. Not this stranger standing in my hospital room, looking at me like I was something she'd scraped off the bottom of her expensive shoes. "Your wife?" I finally managed to croak out. "Marcus, what are you talking about? I'm your wife." He had the audacity to look annoyed. "Not anymore. I filed for divorce 3 months ago. Imani. You were served the papers. This isn't news. 3 months ago. 3 months." I tried to think back, tried to remember. But my head was foggy from the medication and the concussion. 3 months ago would have been right after I inherited the money. Right after everything changed. Had there been papers? Had someone tried to serve me? I had been so busy with the lawyers and the estate, and trying to keep my marriage together, that maybe I had missed something. Or maybe he was lying. I wouldn't put it past him. I never got any papers, I said, my voice stronger now, fueled by anger that was starting to burn through the shock. You can't just bring another woman here and call her your wife while I'm lying in a hospital bed. This is insane, Marcus. This is cruel even for you. Brenda stepped forward then, and that's when everything changed. That's when the real nightmare began. Because when she got close enough for me to see her face clearly, when her eyes met mine, recognition slammed into both of us, like another collision. I knew her. God help me, I knew her. Brenda Collins. She was my lawyer. She was the attorney who had been handling my grandmother's estate, who had been setting up my accounts, who had access to every single detail of my inheritance. She was the one who knew exactly how much money I had, where it was, how it was structured, and now she was standing in my hospital room, claiming to be Marcus's wife. The room started spinning. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some kind of hallucination from the medication. But the look on Brenda's face told me it was all too real. Her eyes went wide with shock. Her mouth dropped open, and she actually stumbled backward, like she'd been slapped. You, she gasped. Her voice strangled. You're Imani Washington? You're the Imani Washington? Oh my God. Oh my God. She turned to Marcus, her perfectly composed facade cracking. You said your wife's name was Imani, but I didn't make the connection. Marcus, you idiot. You absolute idiot. Do you have any idea who she is? Do you have any idea what you've done? Marcus looked confused, looking between us with growing alarm. What are you talking about? You know her? Brenda was backing toward the door now, her face pale. She's my client. She's the Washington heir. $11 million, Marcus. She's the one with the $11 million inheritance that I've been managing. How could you not tell me? The way she said it, the horror in her voice, it wasn't guilt or shame, it was fear. She was afraid of being caught, afraid that their little scheme, whatever it was, had just fallen apart. Marcus's face went through a rapid series of expressions, shock, understanding, and then something cold and calculating. He recovered quickly. I'll give him that. So what? He said, his voice hard. She's still my wife. That money is community property. Half of it belongs to me. I found my voice then, and it came out as a roar, despite my broken ribs. Get out, both of you, get out of my room right now. But they didn't move. Marcus actually smiled, and it was the cruelest expression I'd ever seen on his face. We're not going anywhere, Imani. In fact, we need to have a serious conversation about your mental state. You see, I've been documenting your erratic behavior for months. The mood swings, the paranoia, the inability to handle basic responsibilities. I think the trauma from this accident has really pushed you over the edge. You might need to be declared mentally incompetent. For your own safety, of course. And when that happens, as your husband, your legal husband, because those divorce papers haven't been finalized yet, I'll need to take control of your assets. To protect you. The rage that filled me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was white-hot, all-consuming, a fury so intense that I could taste it like metal on my tongue. This man, this monster that I had married, had orchestrated everything. The delayed divorce, the relationship with my lawyer, the plan to have me declared incompetent. He wasn't just stealing from me, he was trying to erase me completely, to take everything my grandmother had left me, and leave me with nothing but a label of crazy. You'll never get away with this, I hissed through clenched teeth. I'll fight you. I'll fight both of you with everything I have. Marcus laughed again, that same bitter, condescending sound. Fight us? Look at yourself, Imani. You're broken. Literally broken. You can barely move without crying. You have no family to help you. They've all written you off as the black sheep who got lucky. You have no friends because you were too busy being a doormat in this marriage. Who's going to believe you over us? Over a successful businessman and a high-powered attorney? You're nothing but a charity case who got lucky with an inheritance. And now that luck is running out. They left after that, but not before Brenda leaned in and whispered something that made my blood run cold. Your grandmother made some provisions in the trust that require regular competency evaluations. She wanted to make sure you were protected. But those evaluations can be influenced. You should think very carefully about how you proceed from here, Imani. There are ways to make this easy for everyone, or ways to make it very, very difficult for you. It was a threat, clear as day. They would manipulate the evaluations, bribe doctors, falsify records, whatever it took to have me declared incompetent, and take my inheritance. After they left, I lay there in that hospital bed, trembling with rage and pain and despair. For a long time, I considered giving up. What was the point of fighting? They were right about one thing: I was alone. My family had never really accepted me. My mother had died when I was young, and my father's side of the family had always treated me like an outsider. My grandmother was the only one who loved me, and she was gone. I had no siblings, no close friends. Marcus had systematically isolated me over the years, and I had been too blind to see it. Every time I tried to make plans with friends, he would guilt me, or create a crisis. Every time I wanted to take a class, or join a group, he convinced me it was a waste of time and money. He had cut me off from the world so effectively that now, when I needed allies, there was nobody. But then, something shifted inside me. Maybe it was the medication wearing off. Maybe it was the anger finally burning away the despair. Maybe it was my grandmother's voice in my head, telling me to be strong, to fight, to never let anyone make me feel small. Whatever it was, I decided in that moment that I would not be destroyed. Not by Marcus, not by Brenda, not by anyone. They wanted a fight, they would get one. But I had to be smart. I couldn't just rage and scream. That would play right into their narrative that I was unstable. I needed to think strategically, to plan carefully, to outmaneuver them at their own game. The first thing I did was document everything, every visit, every conversation, every threat. I used the voice recording app on my phone during Marcus's subsequent visits. He came back several times over the next few days, each time with new threats and demands. He wanted me to sign paperwork. He wanted access to my accounts. He wanted power of attorney. And each time, I refused. And each time, I recorded every word he said. The nurses became my witnesses too. I told them what was happening, showed them the recordings. Some of them looked at me, with that same pity I hated. But others got angry on my behalf. They saw a woman being abused and manipulated, and they wanted to help. One nurse, an older woman named Patricia, pulled me aside one day and told me about her daughter who had gone through a similar situation. She gave me the name of a lawyer, a real lawyer, not someone like Brenda, who would betray me, someone who specialized in cases involving financial abuse and coercive control. I called that lawyer from my hospital bed, and for the first time since the accident, I felt a spark of hope. His name was James Morrison, and he listened to my story without judgment, without interruption. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Washington," he finally said, "you're in a very dangerous situation. But you're also in a position of power that they don't realize. The recordings you've made, if authentic, could be used against them. The timing of the divorce filing, the relationship with your estate lawyer, the threats, it all paints a very clear picture of conspiracy and fraud. But we need to move carefully. If they suspect you're building a case, they'll escalate. They might try to have you committed involuntarily. They might forge documents. We need evidence of their plans before they can execute them." So we made a plan. A careful, methodical plan. I would pretend to be broken, defeated, considering their terms. I would let them think they were winning, while I gathered more evidence, while James built a case, while we prepared for the real battle. It was the hardest acting job of my life. Every time Marcus visited, I had to swallow my rage and play the victim. I cried on cue. I acted confused and disoriented. I pretended to consider signing over power of attorney, and all the while, I was recording, documenting, building an ironclad case against them. Brenda came back too, acting concerned and professional, like she hadn't just betrayed every ethical standard of her profession. She brought papers for me to sign, documents that would give Marcus control over the trust while I recovered. I stalled, said I needed time to think, played weak and indecisive. But I was learning things. Through James's investigators, through careful research, I discovered that Marcus and Brenda's relationship had started months before my accident. They had been planning this for a long time, probably since the moment they learned about my inheritance. Marcus had been in debt, serious debt from gambling, and failed business ventures that I knew nothing about. He needed my money to save himself, and Brenda, well, Brenda had her own problems. She was being investigated by the Bar Association for mishandling client funds in another case. She needed money too, and she needed it fast. They had found each other, two desperate, greedy people, willing to destroy an innocent woman for financial gain. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. Marcus had been having affairs for years, multiple women, including a few who he had convinced to give him money. He was a con artist, essentially, someone who used charm and manipulation to take advantage of people. I was just his longest con. And the car accident? That wasn't random. The investigators found evidence that the truck driver had been paid off. Marcus had arranged for someone to cause an accident, hoping it would either kill me or incapacitate me enough that he could take control of my assets. When I survived, he just adjusted his plan. The realization that my husband, the man I had loved and trusted, had tried to have me killed, was almost too much to process. I spent weeks in that hospital, recovering physically, while waging a secret war. The doctors cleared me to go home, but I refused. I told them I was afraid, that I didn't feel safe, that my home life was unstable. They placed me in a rehabilitation facility instead. A place where Marcus couldn't get to me as easily. Where I had witnesses around me, at all times. He was furious, accused me of being dramatic and manipulative, but I held firm, and the doctors supported me. They had seen enough of his behavior during visits to have concerns of their own. During this time, James was working tirelessly. He filed motions to freeze my assets, preventing Marcus from accessing anything without court approval. He submitted the recordings as evidence of coercion and fraud. He exposed Brenda's relationship with Marcus and filed complaints with the Bar Association and her law firm. Everything started happening fast after that. Brenda was suspended from practice pending investigation. The firm she worked for terminated her immediately and began their own internal review of all her cases, including mine. Marcus's divorce filing was challenged based on improper service and evidence of ulterior motives. The walls were closing in on them, and they knew it. That's when things got really dangerous. Marcus showed up at the rehabilitation facility one night, drunk and raging. He bypassed security somehow and burst into my room, screaming that I had ruined everything, that I was an ungrateful, vindictive witch who deserved everything that was coming to me. He grabbed me, his hands around my throat, and I genuinely thought he was going to kill me right there. But the security guards reached us in time, pulled him off, and had him arrested. The assault charge was the final nail in the coffin for his plans. No judge would give him control over anything now, not with a pending criminal charge for attempting to harm me. Brenda tried to distance herself from Marcus after his arrest, claimed she had been manipulated, that she didn't know the full extent of his plans, but the evidence said otherwise. Text messages between them, emails, bank transactions, it all showed a clear conspiracy. She was disbarred, lost everything. Her career, her reputation, her freedom, when criminal charges were filed against her for fraud and conspiracy. And Marcus? Marcus went to jail. The evidence of the planned accident, the assault, the financial manipulation, it all added up to serious prison time. But you know what the worst part is? Even now, even after everything, there's a part of me that mourns what I thought we had. I mourn the marriage I believed in, the man I thought I knew, the life I thought we were building together. That version of Marcus never existed. He was always a lie, always a monster, in a convincing mask. But I loved the mask. I loved the illusion. And accepting that it was all fake, that I wasted years of my life on someone who saw me as nothing but a meal ticket. That pain is different from the physical pain of broken bones. It's deeper. It cuts into your soul and makes you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. I was released from the rehabilitation facility eventually, physically healed but emotionally scarred in ways that would take years to process. I went back to my grandmother's house, the house that was now mine. It felt empty and cold without her, but it also felt safe. I started therapy, working through the trauma of betrayal and abuse. I started rebuilding my life, piece by piece. The inheritance was still mine, secured by the legal protections my grandmother had wisely put in place. Marcus never got a penny, neither did Brenda. They're both paying for what they did, but no punishment will ever truly balance the scales for what they took from me. My family? They showed their true colors during all of this. The moment they heard about my inheritance, suddenly everyone wanted to reconnect. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were calling, asking for loans and investments. Aunts and uncles who had barely acknowledged my existence were showing up with business proposals and sob stories. They didn't care about me. They never did. They just wanted access to the money. I cut them all off. Every single one. They protested, called me selfish and ungrateful, said family should stick together. But where were they when I was lying in that hospital bed alone? Where were they when Marcus was threatening me? Where were they during any of the hard times in my life? They were nowhere, and I owed them nothing. The person who did show up, surprisingly, was Patricia, that nurse from the hospital. After everything settled down, she came to visit me, brought me homemade soup and sat with me while I cried about everything I'd been through. She didn't want anything from me except to make sure I was okay. She became a friend, maybe the first real friend I'd had in years. She reminded me that not everyone is out to use you, that there are still good people in the world. It was a lesson I desperately needed. I threw myself into charitable work after that, using some of the inheritance to fund causes my grandmother had cared about. Education for underprivileged kids, housing for domestic violence survivors, scholarships for young women pursuing careers in business and law. It felt right, using the money she left me to make a difference, to help people who were vulnerable the way I had been vulnerable. And slowly, I started to heal. Not fully, I don't know if I'll ever fully heal from what Marcus and Brenda did to me, but enough to function, enough to find moments of joy again, enough to believe that my life could still have meaning and purpose. There are days when the anger comes back, fierce and overwhelming. Days when I think about Marcus in prison, and it's not enough, when I wish I could make him suffer the way he made me suffer. Days when I see happy couples and I want to scream at them that love is a lie, that trust will destroy you, that everyone is just waiting for the right moment to stab you in the back. But those days are becoming fewer. I'm learning to channel that anger into something productive, into advocacy for other victims of financial abuse and coercive control. I speak at legal conferences now, sharing my story to help lawyers recognize the signs of what I went through. I work with domestic violence organizations, funding programs, and sharing my experience. The money doesn't feel real most days. $11 million. It's just numbers and accounts, pieces of paper that represent value. What's real is the pain. What's real is the betrayal. What's real is the knowledge that the person you loved most in the world saw you as nothing but a resource to be exploited. That's what keeps me up at night. Not worry about finances or investments or estate planning, the trauma, the psychological damage of realizing that your entire marriage was a con, that every "I love you" was a calculation, that every moment of intimacy was just him playing a part to maintain access to his target. I've learned things about myself through this nightmare. I've learned that I'm stronger than I ever knew, that I can survive things I thought would destroy me, that I can fight back when cornered, but I've also learned that I'm broken in ways I'll never fully repair. I don't trust easily anymore. I don't love easily. I see ulterior motives everywhere, questioning every kindness, suspicious of every friendly gesture. It's exhausting and lonely, this constant vigilance against being hurt again. I know it's not healthy. My therapist tells me I need to work on it, that not everyone is like Marcus, that I deserve to let people in again. But knowing something intellectually, and feeling it emotionally, are two very different things. Sometimes I wonder what my grandmother would think of all this. Would she be proud of how I fought back? Would she be disappointed that I let Marcus into my life in the first place? That I didn't see through him sooner? She was such a good judge of character. She never liked Marcus, I realize now. She was always polite to him, but never warm, never welcoming in the way she was with other people. She knew. Somehow, she knew what he was, and she tried to protect me by setting up all those legal safeguards in the trust. She knew I would need protection, even from my own husband. The thought makes me cry every time. The legal battles aren't completely over. Marcus has appeals pending, though no one expects them to succeed. His lawyers are just dragging things out, hoping for some technicality or miracle. Brenda is serving her sentence, and I hear she's not adjusting well to prison life. Part of me, the petty part that I'm not proud of, takes satisfaction in that. She destroyed her entire career, her freedom, her future, all for money she never got to enjoy. Was it worth it? I want to ask her. Was destroying an innocent person's life worth absolutely nothing in the end? But I'll never speak to her again. She's dead to me, just like Marcus. I've started dating again, though calling it dating feels like an overstatement. More like cautiously allowing men to buy me coffee, while I interrogate them about their finances, their past relationships, their family history, everything. I'm impossible, I know. No normal person would put up with my level of paranoia and mistrust, but I can't help it. Every time someone shows interest in me, my first thought is, what do they want? What's their angle? Are they after the money? It's exhausting for both of us, and nothing has progressed beyond a few awkward coffee dates. Maybe that's all I'm capable of now. Maybe Marcus and Brenda broke that part of me permanently, the part that can believe in genuine human connection and love. My physical scars healed relatively well. The arm that was broken has full range of motion again, though it aches when it rains. The ribs knitted back together, leaving me with occasional twinges of pain when I breathe deeply or laugh too hard. The bruises faded, from purple to yellow to nothing, erasing the visible evidence of the trauma. But the invisible scars, those are permanent. Those are etched into my psyche, my sense of self, my ability to function in relationships and trust other human beings. Those scars are still raw and bleeding, and I don't know if they'll ever truly heal. I think about the woman I was before all this happened. She seems like a stranger to me now, someone naive and foolish and painfully optimistic. She believed in love conquering all, in the goodness of people, in happily ever after. She's gone now, destroyed as thoroughly as if she had died in that car accident. In her place is someone harder, angrier, more cynical, someone who survived but lost parts of herself in the process. Is that a fair trade? I don't know. Some days I miss that naive woman. Other days I'm grateful she's gone because she would have kept getting hurt, kept being a victim, kept allowing people to use her. The nightmares come regularly. Sometimes I'm back in the car, feeling it flip, and hearing the crunch of metal and glass. Sometimes I'm in the hospital bed, watching Marcus walk in with Brenda, feeling that moment of recognition and horror over and over. Sometimes I'm being choked, his hands around my throat, and I wake up gasping and clawing at my own neck. My therapist says it's PTSD, that it's normal, given what I've been through. She prescribes medication and breathing exercises and cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. They help, a little. But nothing can erase the memories, the fear, the bone-deep knowledge that someone I loved tried to destroy me. The thing that haunts me most is how long it went on without me knowing. How many days, weeks, months, was Marcus planning my destruction, while I made him dinner, kissed him goodnight, told him I loved him? How many times did he lie beside me in bed, plotting how to steal everything from me, maybe even how to kill me? How do you reconcile that? How do you accept that level of deception existed in your daily life, without you sensing any of it? It makes me question my own judgment about everything. If I could be that wrong about the person closest to me, what else am I wrong about? Who else might be lying to me? What other threats am I blind to? I've become obsessed with security. Cameras throughout the house, alarm systems, regular patrols by a private security company. It's excessive, I know. But I need it to feel safe enough to sleep at night. The thought of someone breaking in, of Marcus somehow getting out or sending someone after me, it's not paranoia, when they've already tried to kill you once. My friends, the few I have now, think I'm overreacting. They tell me to relax, that it's over, that I won. But winning doesn't mean safe. Winning just means I survived this round. There's always the possibility of another round, another threat, another person looking at me and seeing dollar signs instead of a human being. The money itself has become a burden in ways I never anticipated. It was supposed to be a blessing, a gift from my grandmother to give me freedom and security. Instead, it's made me a target. It's ruined my marriage, not that the marriage was worth saving, but I didn't know that at the time. It's alienated me from my family. It's made every new relationship suspect. It sits in accounts and investments, growing steadily, and sometimes, I wish I could just give it all away. Start over with nothing, be invisible again, be safe in anonymity. But that would dishonor my grandmother's memory and her wishes. She worked hard for this wealth. She wanted me to have it, to use it wisely, to honor her legacy. So I'm stuck with it, this albatross of money that defines how everyone sees me now. I've thought about writing a book about all this, sharing the story publicly, to help other people recognize the warning signs of what I went through. But I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. It's too raw, too personal, too painful to put out there for public consumption. People would judge me for staying with Marcus as long as I did. They'd question my choices, my intelligence, my self-respect. They'd say they would have known better, would have seen through him sooner, would never have let themselves be victimized that way. But they wouldn't understand. They can't understand unless they've lived it, unless they've been systematically broken down by someone who claimed to love them. The court proceedings were brutal. Sitting in that courtroom, listening to lawyers dissect my marriage, my mental state, my entire life, it was humiliating beyond words. Marcus's defense team tried to paint me as unstable, vindictive, a woman scorned, who was making up lies to punish her husband for wanting a divorce. They brought up every argument we'd ever had, every time I'd cried or gotten emotional, every moment of vulnerability, and twisted it into evidence of mental instability. They tried to use my inheritance against me, suggesting that suddenly having money had driven me crazy with paranoia and suspicion. But James was brilliant. He systematically destroyed every argument they made. He played the recordings of Marcus threatening me, of him admitting to the plan with Brenda. He brought in the evidence of the paid-off truck driver, financial records showing Marcus's debts and his sudden interest in my inheritance. He had expert witnesses testify about coercive control and financial abuse. He exposed every lie, every manipulation, every calculated move Marcus had made. And when Marcus took the stand, he fell apart under cross-examination. His charm and manipulation tactics that worked so well in personal relationships crumbled under legal scrutiny. He contradicted himself, got angry and defensive, showed his true colors to everyone in that courtroom. The judge's ruling was comprehensive and damning. Not only did Marcus lose any claim to my inheritance, but he was ordered to pay restitution for the emotional damages and the costs of the legal battle. Of course, he had no money to pay anything. That was the whole reason he'd targeted me in the first place. But the judgment stood as a matter of record, a legal acknowledgement that what he did was wrong, criminal, unforgivable. It wasn't enough. No legal ruling could ever be enough to compensate for what he took from me, but it was something. It was validation that I wasn't crazy, wasn't making things up, wasn't the problem. He was. He always was. Brenda's trial was separate but equally satisfying in its own way. Her former law firm cooperated fully with the prosecution, turning over all their internal communications and investigations. It turned out I wasn't her only victim. She had been skimming from client accounts for years, using her position of trust to steal from vulnerable people. My case was just the most brazen, the most calculated. When the full extent of her crimes came to light, the judge showed no mercy. 10 years in federal prison. Her legal career was over before she even walked into that courtroom, but now her freedom was gone too. I attended the sentencing, sat in the back of the courtroom, and watched her cry and beg for leniency. I felt nothing. No sympathy, no satisfaction, just emptiness. She had destroyed herself for money she never got to spend, and now she would rot in prison thinking about all the choices that led her there. The strangest thing happened after all the legal battles concluded. I expected to feel relief, maybe even happiness. Justice had been served, right? The bad guys were punished. I kept my inheritance. I was safe. But instead, I felt hollow. Like I'd been running on adrenaline and rage for so long, that without them, there was nothing left. Just this vast emptiness where my emotions used to be. My therapist said it was depression, a natural response after prolonged trauma. She adjusted my medications, recommended intensive therapy, suggested I might benefit from a support group for abuse survivors. I tried it all. Some things helped more than others. But nothing could fill that void inside me. I started traveling, thinking maybe a change of scenery would help. I went to places my grandmother had always wanted to visit, but never got the chance. Paris, Tokyo, Bali, Barcelona. I stayed in luxury hotels, ate at expensive restaurants, saw all the tourist attractions. It should have been wonderful, liberating, everything I'd ever dreamed of. But I felt like a ghost moving through these beautiful places, unable to really experience them, unable to feel joy or wonder, or anything beyond this persistent numbness. I took pictures not because I wanted memories, but because that's what people do when they travel. I went through the motions of living without actually living. In Barcelona, something shifted. I was sitting in a small cafe, drinking coffee and watching people go by, when an older woman sat down at my table. She spoke broken English and didn't ask permission, just sat down and started talking. Normally, I would have been annoyed, would have politely excused myself and left. But something about her reminded me of my grandmother, maybe the fierce intelligence in her eyes, maybe the way she carried herself with dignity, despite her worn clothes and weathered hands. She told me her story. She'd survived the Spanish Civil War as a child, lost her family, lived through decades of Franco's dictatorship, buried 2 husbands and one of her children, and yet here she was, still fighting, still living, still finding reasons to smile. The pain never leaves, she told me, in her heavily accented English. But you learn to carry it. You learn that you can hold both pain and joy in the same heart. That surviving is not the same as living, but surviving is the first step. You survived, yes? I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. Good. Now you must learn to live again. Not the life you had before that person is gone, but a new life. Stronger, wiser, with eyes that see truth. It will be hard. But you are strong. I can see this. You will do it. She patted my hand, paid for her coffee, and walked away. I never saw her again, never even got her name, but her words stayed with me, echoing in my head during sleepless nights and difficult days. Learning to live again. What does that even mean when everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world has been shattered? How do you build a new life on the ruins of the old one? I didn't have answers to those questions, but I started trying. Really trying, not just going through the motions. I came home from traveling and made real changes. I sold the house I'd shared with Marcus. Every room had memories that poisoned my peace. I bought a new place, smaller, but entirely mine, untainted by his presence. I decorated it exactly how I wanted, with colors and furniture that made me happy, not what someone else approved of. I went back to school, something I'd always wanted to do but Marcus had discouraged. Got my MBA, threw myself into studying business and finance and all the things I needed to know to properly manage my inheritance and turn it into something meaningful. I was the oldest student in most of my classes, and at first, I felt self-conscious about it, but then I realized I didn't care what anyone thought. I was there for me, to prove to myself that I could do this, that I was more than just a victim or an heiress. I had a brain, I had ambition, I had worth beyond money or marriage or what anyone else thought of me. My classmates were mostly nice, though some were clearly intimidated by my age and the rumors about my inheritance. One young woman, Maria, became a genuine friend. She didn't know my story at first, just saw me struggling with an accounting assignment, and offered to help. We started studying together, then grabbing coffee, then actually talking about real things, our fears, our dreams, our experiences. When I finally told her what I'd been through, she didn't treat me like a victim or a cautionary tale. She just listened, hugged me, and said, "You're a badass for surviving that." It was exactly what I needed to hear. Through school and through Maria, I started rebuilding a social circle. Real friends. People who liked me for who I was, not what I had. It was terrifying at first. Trusting people again, letting them close enough to hurt me. But I was learning to recognize red flags earlier, to set boundaries, to walk away from anyone who made me uncomfortable. I was learning that not everyone was Marcus. That most people were just regular humans trying to get through life. No ulterior motives, no elaborate schemes. It sounds obvious, but when you've been betrayed so fundamentally, relearning basic trust is a monumental task. My relationship with money evolved too. At first, it was just this thing I had, this responsibility I didn't know how to handle. But as I learned more through my studies, as I worked with financial advisors and investment managers who were actually trustworthy, I started to see it differently. Money was a tool. Nothing more, nothing less. It couldn't buy happiness, or love, or trust, or any of the things that actually mattered, but it could fund research into domestic violence prevention. It could provide scholarships for women escaping abusive relationships. It could support legal aid organizations that helped people who couldn't afford lawyers like James. It could be used to create change, to prevent other women from going through what I went through. I started a foundation in my grandmother's name, the Washington Foundation for Survivors. We funded shelters, legal services, counseling programs, job training for women trying to rebuild their lives after abuse. We partnered with law schools to create clinics specializing in cases like mine, financial abuse, coercive control, intimate partner fraud. We trained lawyers and social workers and law enforcement officers to recognize the signs, to take these cases seriously, to not dismiss women as hysterical or vindictive when they reported these crimes. It became my purpose, my reason for getting up in the morning, my way of transforming my pain into something meaningful. The work was hard and often heartbreaking. Every woman who came to us for help was like looking in a mirror at my past self, scared, traumatized, unsure if anyone would believe her, uncertain if she deserved help. I couldn't personally meet with all of them. There were too many, and my therapist warned me about vicarious trauma. But I read their stories. I approved funding for their cases. I celebrated their victories, and mourned their setbacks. And sometimes, when a case was particularly difficult, or when a woman was losing hope, I would write her a letter. I never identified myself, just signed it, a survivor. I told them they weren't alone, that I understood, that they could make it through this hell, and come out the other side. I told them what that old woman in Barcelona had told me, that they could learn to carry the pain, and still live, still find joy, still build something beautiful from the ruins. Years passed. The acute pain of betrayal faded into something more manageable, more like an old injury that aches occasionally but doesn't stop you from functioning. I graduated with my MBA, took over more active management of my investments and the foundation. I dated occasionally, though I still struggled with trust issues. There was one man, David, who seemed genuinely good, patient with my paranoia, understanding about my past, respectful of my boundaries. We dated for a year, and for a while, I thought maybe I could do this, maybe I could love again. But when he proposed, I panicked. The idea of marriage, of legally binding myself to another person, of being that vulnerable again, I couldn't do it. I broke his heart, and mine too. He deserved better than someone as damaged as me. Maybe that's my reality now. Maybe I'll never be able to fully trust someone enough for that level of commitment again. Maybe Marcus and Brenda didn't just steal money and time, maybe they stole my ability to have the kind of relationship I once dreamed of. That loss hits me sometimes, when I least expect it. I'll see a happy couple, elderly people who've been married for decades, still holding hands and laughing together, and I'll feel this piercing grief for something I'll never have. Not because no one would want me, but because I can't let myself want them. Not fully, not without reservation and escape plans and protective walls. But I'm learning to be okay with that. Learning that life doesn't have to look like what I thought it would to still have value and meaning. I have my work with the foundation. I have genuine friendships. I have financial security and independence. I have my education and my grandmother's legacy. I have survived something that would have destroyed many people, and I'm still here, still fighting, still making a difference. Maybe that has to be enough. Maybe that's more than enough. The anger is still there, simmering under the surface. I don't think it will ever fully go away. Sometimes it flares up bright and hot when I hear about another woman being abused, when I see statistics about intimate partner violence, when I remember exactly how it felt to hear Marcus call me a loser while I lay broken in a hospital bed. That anger is part of me now, woven into the fabric of who I've become. My therapist says I need to let it go, that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. But maybe my anger serves a purpose. Maybe it fuels my work, drives my determination to help others, keeps me from ever being a victim again. Marcus got out of prison last year, served his time, got released for good behavior. I found out through James, who keeps tabs on these things for me. For weeks after, I barely slept, jumped at every sound, kept checking my security cameras obsessively, but he never came near me. According to James's sources, he moved to another state, changed his name, is working some dead-end job, and living in a tiny apartment. His life is small now, limited, nothing like the grand schemes he once had. Good. I hope every day he remembers what he lost, what he threw away, how close he came to that $11 million before it all fell apart. I hope he lives with regret the way I live with trauma. It's not enough punishment, but it's something. Brenda has a few more years to serve. I don't think about her as much as I think about Marcus. Maybe because her betrayal, while terrible, wasn't as personal. She was greedy and unethical and criminal, but she didn't pretend to love me. She didn't sleep beside me night after night while plotting my destruction. Her betrayal was professional and financial. His was intimate and soul-crushing. There's a difference. My family occasionally tries to reconnect, especially around holidays. Cards arrive, emails show up, phone calls that I don't answer. They want back in now that the drama has died down, now that they think enough time has passed for me to forgive their absence when I needed them. But I can't. I won't. They showed me who they were, and I believe them. The foundation is my family now. The women we help, the staff who work tirelessly, the volunteers who believe in our mission, they're my people. Blood doesn't mean loyalty. I've learned that lesson well. Chosen family is often stronger than biological family ever could be. I'm turning 40 next month. It feels significant somehow, like crossing a threshold into a new phase of life. The woman I was at 30, before the inheritance and the accident, and the betrayal, she's a distant memory now. I barely recognize her in old photos. She looks so naive, so unguarded, so trusting. I want to reach back through time and warn her, protect her, shake her, and make her see what's coming, but I can't. She had to live through it to become who I am now. And who I am now, for all my scars, and damage, and broken pieces, is someone stronger, wiser, more purposeful than she ever was. The foundation is planning a big gala for next month, combining my birthday celebration with a fundraiser for our new legal clinic. I don't love being the center of attention, but I understand the importance of using my story, my face, my name to draw donors and raise awareness. So I'll put on a designer dress and smile for cameras and give a speech about survival and transformation. I'll thank our supporters and share statistics about domestic violence and financial abuse. I'll be Imani Washington, survivor, philanthropist, advocate, and for a few hours, I'll set aside the pain and the anger and be who everyone needs me to be. But late at night, when the gala is over, and I'm alone, in my secure house, with all my cameras and alarms, I'll remember. I'll remember Marcus's hands around my throat. I'll remember the shock on Brenda's face when she recognized me. I'll remember lying in that hospital bed, broken and alone, making the choice to fight back. I'll remember all of it, because forgetting would be a betrayal of my own experience, a dismissal of my own pain. The memories are part of me now, permanent scars on my psyche that no amount of therapy or time will fully erase. And maybe that's okay. Maybe I'm not supposed to forget. Maybe carrying these memories, this pain, this anger, is how I stay strong enough to do the work that needs doing. Maybe my grandmother knew this somehow, knew that the money she left me would bring challenges but also purpose. Maybe she knew I would need to be broken and rebuilt to truly understand how to help others. I'd like to think so. I'd like to think this suffering wasn't meaningless, that it transformed me into someone who could make a real difference in the world. So here I am, Imani Washington, survivor of betrayal, inheritor of a fortune, founder of a movement to help other survivors. I carry my pain like that old woman in Barcelona taught me, not trying to rid myself of it, but learning to hold it alongside everything else I am. The anger, the joy, the fear, the hope, the trauma, the purpose, all of it, coexisting in the same heart, the same life, the same woman who refuses to be destroyed by what was done to her. This is my story. This is my truth. And if it helps even one person recognize the signs of abuse, find the courage to fight back, survive their own nightmare, then maybe, just maybe, it was all worth it. If my story resonated with you, if it made you feel something, if it opened your eyes to the reality of financial abuse and betrayal that so many people face, then don't let this be the end of the conversation. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts. Have you experienced something similar? Do you know someone who has? What would you have done in my situation? I want to hear from you. I need to hear from you. Because that's how we break the silence around these issues. That's how we help each other survive and thrive. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, stories of survival and strength, and refusing to be broken by the people who tried to destroy us, then hit that subscribe button. There are so many stories that need to be told, so many voices that deserve to be heard. Stay with me on this journey. Let's build a community of survivors who refuse to stay silent. Comment, subscribe, and let's keep this conversation going. Together, we're stronger than anyone who ever tried to tear us down.